Greetings again as we continue our series on the DNA of strength and courage, the 4 pillars of emotional health. I trust that you're doing well through this pandemic and the self-isolation that we're having to experience. I want to give you some tips today, particularly in relationship to getting through this and in dealing it with our personal relationships, husbands and wives, children, whatever your family situation is. And even if you're single and living alone, I want to give you some tips to help us get through this. This 4th installment deals with what's called purposeful endurance. And I want to give this a title today, Creating Purposeful Endurance. Now, all of us have done this at one time or another in learning a new skill, getting an education. We suffered through the changes, the difficulties, even embracing the unknowns so that we could learn the new skill, get the education that we wanted. But this applies to every area of our life. So I want to talk about this in ways of helping us not only get through the pandemic, but ways of enhancing and improving relationships with yourself as well as with others. So when we talk about purposeful endurance, we're talking about having a goal, something that's on the other side. Just like learning a new skill. Maybe it was to get a new job. Maybe it was to get an advancement in your job, or getting an education, learning a craft, whatever that craft might be, whether it was a formal education or on-the-job training, whatever it was. You had to learn a new skill. You had to go through purposeful endurance. Well, going through something without a goal is just endurance. It's just willpower, and there's not a whole lot of motivation to it. But when you have a purpose in mind, what you want to happen as a result of what you're experiencing, now you have purposeful endurance. I want to talk about this. A great scripture in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2. It is a great example of purposeful endurance when Jesus suffered on the cross for the joy that was set before him. He endured the cross. He despised the shame and sat down at the right hand of the Father. He had a goal on the other side of his suffering, and that was our salvation, of course. But I want to talk to you about you creating purposeful endurance. Now, some of my clients are having a difficult time. Many of the clients that I work with is in relationship coaching. And some of them are having a difficult time now being at home, all the fear that's setting in, the unknowns that are before us. Some have lost their jobs, some are experiencing financial difficulties. Others are suffering from anxiety in many different ways. Now, some of our couples are doing a great job of using this opportunity to enhance the relationship. But let me give you some tips that I think will be very valuable to you. First of all, create purposeful endurance. What do you want your relationship to look like? If you're struggling in your relationship right now, instead of focusing on the problems that are existing, focus on what you want that relationship to look like. If you're out of a job right now and don't know what your future holds for you, start creating it in your mind. What do you want it to be? Start thinking in terms of what you want to accomplish. See, if we get stuck in just regretting what's happening and resisting what's happening, then we're going to increase our suffering. I have a formula. It's called pain times resistance equals increased suffering. Now, acceptance of our reality is not passivity. I don't mean que sera, sera, whatever will be, will be. That's not good theology. That's not even good psychology. That's not a good philosophy of life. We have to determine what we want the other side of this to look like. Now, the second part of that is determining who you need to be, not who your spouse needs to be, not who your boss needs to be or whatever, not what somebody else needs to be, but who do you need to become? What belief system will you have to turn loose of, and what new belief system will you have to take hold of? Now, out of our belief system becomes all of our assumptions. Now, we can assume anything, but our belief system drives that. If you're assuming that this is the end of the world, you have a belief system that's dictating that to you. If you have a belief system that says this is never going to get any better, then that's the assumptions that you're going to have. Now, assumptions drive our behaviors and our responses to other people. What we assume will often get us into trouble. Now, we have to come to a place of acceptance. There's a quote from Carl Rogers, a psychologist who wrote his own theory of psychology and is very prominent. He had a sign over the door of his office that he looked at every time that he went in. And here's what it said: if I can accept myself today for who I am, I can change myself for tomorrow. Now, that's a very powerful statement. Acceptance is not passivity. Acceptance is getting out of the resistance of what is. This shouldn't have happened. I agree. Anybody would agree with that. I shouldn't have to be in this situation. I totally agree. But the reality is you are. And until you accept that, you have no power to change the present or the future. Now, some forms of resistance is blaming others. Now, plenty of blame to go around here with the situation that we're in today. Well, the government should have known about it sooner. They should have acted sooner. See, we're going through something we've never gone through before. We're not in this alone. This is not an American problem. This is a world problem. Got a picture of the world behind me here, and certainly this is a world problem. Now, when you're doing something, going through something you've never gone through before, you're going to make mistakes. If you're going through the trial of being at home right now, you're going to make some mistakes. Sometimes your emotions are going to take over. You might become what we call emotionally clouded or even emotionally hijacked. That's what happened to one of my clients that I was talking to the other day. They were totally emotionally hijacked in their relationship, blaming each other for how they were feeling. That is another form of resistance. And then self-justification. I have a right to feel this way. I have a right to feel sad. I have a right to be anxious. I have a right to be hurt. Yes, all of those things may be very well true, but justifying your negative behaviors or negative feelings won't change them. You have to decide how you want to respond. Now, this is important. Making the decision of how you want to respond is huge. Now, some people say, we compare this to times past. At least we're not sending our kids off to war. This is World War II. Well, let me put this in perspective. We can't compare our situation to other situations. See, it's not the situation that determines whether it's large or small. It's the emotions that we attach to it. So the emotion that you're attaching to it makes it bigger than life. I had a couple I was working with, their biggest complaint, the wife's biggest complaint about the husband, he didn't put the dishes in the dishwasher. He was very good about putting them in the sink, but he didn't put them in the dishwasher. Now, compared to some other people's marital problems, relationship issues, that seems very small. But it wasn't the size of the issue. It was the emotion that she had attached to it. When he understood the emotion that was attached to it, he got the message. She said to him, when you don't do that, I don't feel loved, I don't feel respected, and I don't know how to deal with that. He thought for a moment. He said, if putting the dishes in the dishwasher helps you feel loved, I am happy to put the dishes in the dishwasher. Now, compared to what you're going through right now, that might seem small. But again, it's not the size of the issue. It's the emotion that's attached to it, the meanings that are attached to it. So I want to challenge you to make a declaration of what you want life to be like and who you need to become. Now, how do we deal with how we need to become? Well, I've already mentioned that we have to check our belief system. Beliefs drive behavior. All behavior is driven by a belief. So if you're having negative responses, you have to check out your negative belief system. You say, that sounds awfully simple. Well, I wished it was simple. I work with a lot of people, and trust me, I know in my own experience, as well as working with others, that it's not easy. It's not simple. It's complex. Because, see, out of our belief system comes our behaviors. And with behaviors are accompanied with assumptions, expectations, limiting beliefs, negative thoughts, negative behaviors. All comes out of our belief systems. Our attitude comes out of our belief systems. Now, if you set a goal for what you want life to look like, even setting a goal of how you want to experience what we're going through, and you get your assumptions, attitude, beliefs, all going in the same direction, you can change the world. You can change the atmosphere in your home. You can change your internal experience. One of my favorite authors was Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl became well known as a psychiatrist and wrote his own theory of psychology. He was a Holocaust survivor under some of the most extreme conditions that humanity has ever had to experience. He watched his own wife and children be killed right in front of him, and then stripped of any valuables that they had on them. Stripped his wife of the jewelry she was wearing, and horrible atrocities that took place in the Holocaust. He watched many, many people, thousands of people, march into the gas chambers of Hitler's concentration camps. He watched his peers lose their minds, some of them beaten to death, others just gone into deep despair. And there was one thing that helped him get through it all. Here's what he says in his book. He said, he determined, I may not have control over what you do to me. I don't have control over what you did to my family. I don't have control over what's going on in these camps. But there's one thing I do have control over, and that's how I'm going to respond. See, we don't have any control over this pandemic that we're going through, but you do have control over how you're going to respond. This is what I mean by creating purposeful endurance. Don't just set aside passively through this and As I said a moment ago, let Doris Day's song play through your mind. Whatever will be, que sera, sera. But determine how you want to respond. Now, I'll tell you what Sharon and I are doing. We get up every morning and we prepare for the day. She gets up, does her hair, puts on her makeup, puts on her jewelry, and I get up, clean myself up, put on something that I can feel good about, as though we were going off to work or going off to meet somebody. We're preparing for the day. Now, as you prepare for the day, it starts creating ideas and creativity, releasing the creativity. Now, if you're hanging on to resistance to what is, I want to challenge you to ask yourself, what do I need to turn loose of? Who am I trying to control, or what am I trying to control that I have no power over? Maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's your children, maybe it's the circumstances that we're in. And you're trying to control it. Maybe that's something you need to ask yourself. Is this something I need to turn loose of? Is this enhancing what's going on, or is it taking away, diminishing it? The other thing that I would ask you is, what other things do you need to turn loose of? What beliefs? What negative beliefs? Now, if you want to know where your negative beliefs are coming from, look at your negative behavior. You're not just responding negative because you want to. You've got a negative belief that's driving that behavior. And then to help you find that, look for your assumptions. What are you assuming? What are you assuming other people know? What are you assuming that other people know about you? And then your expectations. What are you expecting of yourself that's inappropriate? Maybe it's beyond what you're able to do. For instance, if you're expecting perfection, you have an expectation that's not going to be realized. And you're going to look at all of the faults. Now, all of us have them. And when we're going through things, we make mistakes. Our mistakes is not our identity. Our mistakes are not even the conclusion of what's going to happen. It's the recovery from those mistakes that helps identify us. Now, I want to say something in regard to what's going on in our government. And this is not a political statement whatsoever. I would say this, I don't care who is in office, Democrats, Republicans, independents. This is not a political statement. We're going through something the world has never gone through before, like we're going through it now. Mistakes are going to be made. Local officials, state officials, the federal government, sure, mistakes are going to be made, because when you're going through things you've never gone through before, you're going to make mistakes. So let's give a little grace to each other and a little grace to our government, who's trying to get this right, locally, state-wise, and federal. They're trying to get it right. And let's give grace to each other. Maybe you need to give grace to your children. Maybe you need to give grace to your spouse. Maybe your children need to give some grace to you, mom, dad. And if you're sitting there alone in your house or apartment, wherever, and you feel totally isolated, reach out by social media, phone call, somebody, and just talk to somebody. Just have a conversation. I know I enjoy doing our Zoom workshops and the work that I'm doing with different individuals. At least I get to see a face rather than just hear a voice. So I want to challenge you. Practice creative, purposeful endurance. We're going to get through this, and we can use this experience for our good, or we can use it for our detriment. One more point. You can't erase an experience. Some people are saying, we just want to get back to normal. Can't go backwards. Now, that's true in your relationship. That's true in your family situation. We're not going to go back to what was. We're going to create something new. Now, we can either learn from our situations or we can be ensnared by our situations. It's totally up to us, each and every person. So what creative, purposeful endurance are you going to have? God bless you. Talk to you again soon.